Let's talk about the NBA schedule. How important is it? What are the things to know? What are the things to break down? Fantasy playoffs, how do we approach it, Michael Bolton?
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and that pizza delivery truck has been parked across the street for 2 weeks. How long does it take to deliver a pizza? I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner, so visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms. Did my first mock draft of the season last week. There won't be one coming this week, I don't think. I don't know, but yes, we will do multiple ones. It's just no point at this early stage in doing them like, 2 days, every 2 days or anything like that. We are going to be doing them, don't worry. What we are going to be finishing off this week as well is the Beat Reporter team previews. So we're going to have the Grizzlies, the Nets, the Suns, the Jazz, the Bucks. Who else is coming up this week? Sixers. I think that's what we've got left this week. What we're doing today is talking about the NBA schedule, which came out a few days ago. There is importance in the NBA schedule. You've got to be cautious that you're not thinking that it's too important, but there is importance in looking at the NBA schedule when we start thinking about things for fantasy. My general rule of thumb is that when you're talking about the top of the draft, you want to see if there are any anomalies in playoff schedules. That's where you get the interesting things that maybe you factor in. If someone's got 12 games versus 11 games, I don't think that should be an overriding decision because players can get hurt, players can get traded, players can have bad games. It's not the overriding decision. When you're making decisions from round 6, 7, 8 onwards, don't worry about it. Just don't worry about that sort of thing. As we proved last season, when you are in the fantasy playoffs, streaming through the back 3, 4 spots of your roster is nearly every single time going, even if they're bad players that's coming in. If you're maximizing your roster spots, you are going to get better results. So planning your entire roster around playoff schedules is asinine, stupid, and will not work. If you plan your entire roster that way, you cannot go into a draft and go, I'm just grabbing all of the players who go 4-4-4 in my playoff schedules. Don't do it, won't work. You should consider some of that stuff at the top end of the draft, but jumping players who are worse ahead of players who are better to get one extra game over 3 weeks is also a stupid decision. You want to look for outliers. You also, as a general rule, you want to pay attention to things like quality games and back-to-backs. But I am here to tell you now, as this is just unbelievable promotion for this show, I'm not sure that the gaps in that sort of stuff this season really matter that much. There are some factors to talk about, but as we'll talk about as we go through, I'm not sure how much influence, honestly, this is going to have on drafting. Oh, as my voice cracks because, puberty. Imagine how much more hairier I'm going to get after that. So I'm not sure just how much of an impact all of this is going to have. But we're going to talk about it. We're going to break it down. I'm going to talk about my recommended playoff dates as well, because I know you all want to hear about that. So let's just get into it and get things started. And we might as well just start with that. The things I'm going to mainly focus on in this show are 3 main playoff periods. My recommendation, which is finishing your playoffs on March the 22nd. Also a reminder, as I am talking through on this show, I said that is week 22. And you want to know why I say that is week 22? Because it is literally the 22nd week of the NBA schedule. There will be, if you play on Yahoo, or you play on Fantrax, or if you play in custom leagues, or whatever, the nomenclature of naming weeks will be different. And that is why it is ridiculous to blindly quote week names. Because in previous seasons, Yahoo would combine the All-Star week. Yes? Then last season, they made a decision to combine a couple of the weeks around the NBA Cup. Now, they got it completely wrong, but they combined them. Meaning that this week 22 is actually maybe week 20 if you've got like game week 20, maybe is a better way of phrasing it, because you've got 2 separate combinations. But ESPN doesn't do that. I don't believe CBS does that. So a week 20 on Yahoo might be week 22 on ESPN. And it just leads to confusion. That is why I say dates. I'll talk dates, because dates aren't going to change. We're not going to introduce a new calendar. Sorry, Ethiopia, we're not doing it. We're keeping the same calendar. So, I've got those dates there, but they are strictly based on the calendar. Calendrical dates. Calendrical week numbers. Yahoo's default... Now, actually, you know what? I'm saying this. I don't know. But given Yahoo's incredible reticence, stubbornness may say, to change and make things better, I'm going to say they just don't adjust anything. Because their default has been, forever, that the default is that the season ends, the fantasy playoffs end, the second last week of the season. They lop off the final week because they think it's football. They don't know any different, of course, different shaped ball. They can't see that, but they think it's football. So mine goes up until March 22nd is when I would finish off. Starting on whatever week it is. Let me think of the name of the week. Starting on the 2nd of March through the 22nd of March. Yahoo's, I believe, will start on the 23rd of March, the 16th of March, going through to the 5th of March. That's how I believe Yahoo would do it. And ESPN's default is they run things 2-week playoffs for 4 weeks. So 2 rounds, 2 weeks. So they usually go from the 16th of March all the way through until April the 12th. Again, absolutely insane, because why would you change to make things better? But they're the 3 things I'm going to talk about. Ending your playoffs on March 22nd, my recommendation. Ending your playoffs on April the 5th, Yahoo's recommendation. Ending your playoffs on April 12th with a 4-game or a 4-week playoff situation, that's ESPN default. And they're the dates we're talking about. We'll get into playoffs in the back half of this show. Let's talk back-to-backs. And I'm going to say this now and I'll say it again later. There may be more back-to-backs introduced because every team only has 80 games scheduled because of the NBA Cup. 2 games will need to be scheduled. If you make the quarterfinals, you have your quarterfinal, and then you win that, you have your semifinal. If you don't, you just get 2 extra games added in on that NBA Cup schedule. Okay? And we'll talk about that more at the end. At the way things currently go, there's 16 back-to-backs, but the NBA Cup is scheduled for a Tuesday. There are games scheduled on the Wednesday straight after that. So it is possible that the teams that play in the NBA Cup final will then have a back-to-back. It is possible that on the days where there are no games currently scheduled, which is, if I have a look at it, it is Thursday, December 11th, Friday, December 12th, Sunday, December 14th, and Monday, December 15th. Some of those might be 0-game days. Some of them might have games on, but there might be teams that play back-to-backs. I would doubt that there is, because remember, on those off days, which there are no games scheduled, we've got Thursday, Friday, Sunday, Monday. There are 4 days there. Teams only need to play 2 games over those 4 days. So it would be insane. NBA, you've done it before though. It would be insane if teams have back-to-backs. I don't know what they'll do. It's also possible that the Monday, the 15th of December, they just don't play any games to lead into the NBA Cup on the Tuesday. Meaning we would have the Thursday, Friday, and Sunday as fill-in games where teams have to play 2 of those 3 nights, which, of course, could easily lead to back-to-backs unless you're doing it where every team plays on the Sunday. 15 games on the Sunday. Again, you could do 15 Sunday, 0 Monday. Possible they do that. But I don't know. But these are the back-to-backs that we know. So there's possible that there is the Thursday, Friday back-to-backs in that week of the NBA Cup. There's a possibility of that. And there's also a random possibility they give us Sunday, Monday back-to-back. And there's also a possibility the team playing in the NBA Cup final, even though that game doesn't count for fantasy, will go a Tuesday, Wednesday back-to-back. Okay, got that. There are 5 teams that have 16 back-to-backs. Charlotte, Denver, Philadelphia, Phoenix, and Washington. Huge red flags already there. LaMelo Ball, yes, I believe LaMelo Ball has a chance to play more games, but there is still a risk. Now, he played back-to-backs last season. Until he didn't, but he did play them. So it's you cannot sit here and wipe 16 games off LaMelo Ball. That won't happen. I mean, you could, but you can't say he's going to sit every back-to-back. I don't believe that. Denver with 16 back-to-backs, it's a lot. I'd look for a few more rests in there. The Philadelphia one is the huge one. We're already worried about what Embiid's going to do. I would say there is 0 shot that Embiid plays a back-to-back this season. So you're already taking 16 games off. You're already taking 16 games off, which means that he can only miss 1 more game to qualify for NBA awards. Don't worry. I don't think he's touching 50. Paul George, also a risk. I'm not that worried about Phoenix. Washington, you're going to have Chris Middleton for as long as he's there with 16 back-to-backs. He's going to miss those, and there's tank risk for guys as well, but that's not so much of a concern, I don't think, with drafting. In terms of teams with 15 back-to-backs, we've got a couple of worries here. Golden State, obviously with Jimmy Butler and General Soreness. Steph will miss some of those back-to-backs, not all of them, but that's not a guarantee. And then you've got the Clippers. Now, previously, the Clippers have always seemed to lead the league in back-to-backs. At least this year, they're one fewer. Now, Kawhi did play back-to-backs down the stretch of last season. I don't believe Kawhi is going to be playing all 15 back-to-backs. I think he will sit some of them, but not all of them. But be aware of that. Miami, I don't think you've got any worries there. And New Orleans, again, I think Zion will play some back-to-backs, but I don't know he'll play all of them. And then when DeJounte Murray returns, he will not play back-to-backs. And they've got the most back-to-backs going there, or the second most back-to-backs with 15. I want to talk about the teams with the fewer back-to-backs coming up in a sec. Before we do that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. August the 26th, which is coming up, is officially FanDuel Futures Day. A brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. And for just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So, whether you're calling your MVP, you're eyeing a long shot division winner, or you're ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1, this is your moment. You can take a flyer on the MVP. Maybe you want to look at Matthew Stafford. I'm just getting word. Maybe you don't want to pick Matthew Stafford for MVP. Maybe you want to pick someone who doesn't even play anymore. That would be stupid as well. Big Ben Roethlisberger still around? No, he's not. You can tick your champion. You can go for your dark horse division winners. Maybe even parlay those futures as well. So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game and don't forget to gamble responsibly. All right, let's dig back in now and talk about some more back-to-backs and the way that that is breaking down. Again, these can be important. As always, with this stuff that we're talking about with schedules, the timing of it is important. When things happen is as important as how many. Some other teams with 15 back-to-backs. So I said we're getting into the low ones. We're still on the high one. Portland, don't know that they're at huge risk. Of course, Jeremy Grant in March and April, you can write that off. Toronto, if it goes as bad as last season, that was a huge concern, but I'm not penciling that in now. And then Utah, yeah, they're going to be bad, and they're going to sit guys on back-to-backs. I guarantee you that'll happen. That will happen, right? So there's a tank risk for them. Now the teams with the better schedules. So the bunch of teams here, and this is where the majority of teams sit, is the majority of teams have 14 back-to-backs. Brooklyn, Cleveland, Dallas, Detroit, Houston, and the Lakers have 14. So do Memphis, Milwaukee, the New York Knicks, Orlando, Sacramento, and San Antonio. All of those teams have 14 back-to-backs, the second most amount of back-to-back, or second fewest amount of back-to-backs. The good teams, the teams with the fewest back-to-backs, it's not 12 this year, it's 13. Atlanta, which is great for Kristaps Porzingis. We're only talking a 3 back-to-back difference between the most and the fewest. Also remember, maybe extra back-to-backs get added in, but that's great for Porzingis. Boston, only 13 back-to-backs. Now, I know people think that Boston is still good enough talent to be good. I think they're going to make sure they're not good, but we'll see. They've only got 13 back-to-backs, though. Chicago, they definitely won't tank. Indiana, we'll see what happens with them. Minnesota, that's great news. Not that there was any real worry with them anyway. And then Oklahoma City, who last season on back-to-backs would sometimes sit their entire starting 5. They've only got 13 of them this season, so fewer opportunities to do that. So if you're worried about the Thunder, and I understand why you would be, just from a they're too good perspective, only 13 back-to-backs. When we're going to talk about quality games, I know you're going to want to know what I am talking about when I'm talking about quality games. What do I mean when I say a quality game? A quality game, and I want to be very clear on this. When I say a quality game, it's got nothing to do with the opponent. It's not because you're playing an easy opponent. All it means is that it is a game that is played on a day in the NBA where you almost certainly will not have to make a decision to start or sit. Yep. That's what it is. In the past, our default still is this on Basketball Monster. It's set at 5. I don't believe that's the right way to do it. And by 5, I mean that any game with 5 or fewer NBA games on is considered a quality game day. But let's be honest. Most of you have 10 starters, 3 bench, 10 starters, 4 bench. In the past, I've set my number to 9. So if there was 9 games on an NBA day, or fewer, you could start every one of your players. You know, I've talked about this at length, about this starters and bench on your team. It doesn't matter because realistically, you have 13 active players. You're going to play all of these guys all of the time with a few exceptions. I did more research on this last season and I found that 10 is the better number. So any NBA day where there are 11 games on, 12 games on, 13, 14, or 15, you will almost certainly have to make a start or sit decision. If there are 10, 9, 8, 10 or fewer games on, you probably can start all of your guys. Right? So I used to do it as 9. I am now doing it as 10 as the quality game cutoff. If it's an NBA day where there are 10 games or fewer, you should be good and you shouldn't have to worry about making decisions. This season, I don't think it's really a big concern. Teams either play, the fewest is 62 games on a 10 or fewer night schedule, or they go up to 67. It's not a big deal. It really isn't. Ideally, you want more teams with more quality games because that means that opens up your roster on the higher volume days and you have to make fewer start-to-sit decisions, and also you're able to get more games in during the week because you're not leaving an unplayed game on your bench. But the difference here, over the course of 25 real weeks, being 5 games, it doesn't matter. Look, when we look at weekly streaming stuff, the quality game part matters a lot. Who you add, when you add them, whether you hold guys, that matters. When making drafting decisions, it doesn't matter. I wouldn't pay any attention to this while drafting. 5 games over 25 weeks is inconsequential. I would not worry about that part of it at all. I know some of you will, but I wouldn't worry about it. What I do want to talk about now, though, I want to get in and I want to talk playoffs. Playoffs? I want to talk about how we want to see how these weeks break down. So let's do it. This is my recommended playoff schedule. Remember the weeks. They're weird. Week 20 to 22. That is March the 2nd through to March the 22nd. They are the dates that we are using, starting the playoffs on March the 2nd through to March the 22nd. They are my recommended playoff dates. 4 teams play 12 games. The Clippers, the Knicks, the Suns, and the Wizards. They play 12 games. And that is nearly always going to be the most games that you ever get out of teams in playoffs is 12. So you've got the Clippers, who have a 4-4-4. You've got the Knicks, who have a 4-4-4. You've got the Suns, who have a 4-3-5. And you've got the Wizards, who have a 4-3-5. The bulk of the teams play 11 games. Boston, Brooklyn, Detroit, Golden State, Houston, the Lakers, the Bucks, the Wolves, the Magic, the Sixers, the Spurs, and the Jazz. The next most amount of teams play 10. Charlotte, Dallas, Denver, Indiana, Memphis, Miami, the Pelicans, Portland, Sacramento, and Toronto. And then on the bad side, we always want to look at good and bad, right? The bad is 9 games for Atlanta, Chicago, Cleveland, and Oklahoma City, with Cleveland having the 2-4-3, with Atlanta having the 2-3-4, Chicago going 3-3-3, and OKC also going 3-3-3. So if you're using my recommended playoff schedule, you might consider, do I take Shea? Would I take Shea at 2? Will I take him at 3 when he has got 3 fewer games than a 12-game team? Now, the 12-game teams are the Clippers, the Knicks, the Suns, and the Wizards. So that's not a big concern. But say Luka with 11 games. Wemby with 11 games in your fantasy playoffs versus 9 for Shea. Are those 2 games important? I think they're important enough to at least push Shea into 3rd, maybe 4th. Depends. I think that's important enough. What are the key takeaways for my recommended playoff schedule? Philadelphia, Phoenix, and Washington in this March 2nd to March 22nd period, they have 5-game weeks. Philadelphia and Phoenix and Washington have a 5-game week in finals week. Philadelphia has it in week 2 of the playoffs. But as we know, Joel Embiid is not playing all 5 of those games. Paul George will be at risk. I don't think the Sixers are going to be as bad as last season. But there's obviously some benefits maybe to a Jared McCain, a VJ Edgecombe, Kelly Oubre. Maybe it's a Dem Boner at that point. Maybe it's Quentin Grimes. Maybe it's Tyrese Maxey. Who knows? It's hard. That stuff's impossible to judge. So don't put extra weight on this. But they have a 5-game week in the middle of those playoffs. And then Phoenix with Devin Booker. Washington, you can't bang on any Wizards guys. So don't make Wizards draft decisions based on this. But the Devin Booker, Jalen Green, Mark Williams, that's a nice little bump. Atlanta and Cleveland and New Orleans have 2-game weeks. Both Atlanta and Cleveland have it in week 1. New Orleans has it in week 2. That's terrible, right? So that should have 2-game weeks you want to avoid. Now, does that mean you avoid Trae Young? or Jalen Johnson or Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland or Evan Mobley, I don't know if it means that you avoid them. And usually those avoid decisions to me come in the form of round 1 and maybe round 2 selections. But that does mean Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, Evan Mobley, Donovan Mitchell. You're getting a 2-game playoff week in round 1 of these playoffs. You might be confident enough you've got to buy. And there's so many other players in the area that those guys get drafted that might be considered equivalent that you might want to consider instead. So I'd be just bumping Johnson, Young, Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, Evan Mobley, Donovan Mitchell, just down a little bit based on that. Zion also, 2 games in week 2 of these playoffs. You would put a bit of a dampener. Same with Trey Murphy. If you're making a decision between Trey and someone else and you think they're close, you take the other guy. And that's really where these decisions come in. If it's like, oh, I don't really know, just go the other guy. Is usually a pretty good way of looking at this. What are some other interesting things during this time frame? Well, of course, I just talked about how the Clippers have a 5-game week. I talked about how the Suns have a 5-game week and the Clippers have 12 games. But they also have 4 back-to-backs over that 3-week period. So, watch on Kawhi. While it's great they've got the most games, they've also got 4 back-to-backs. I'm not that worried about Phoenix, but that's there. In terms of quality games, one of the other differentiating factors can be in the playoffs is like, does my team have 12 games, but only 8 of them are quality games? Again, not a factor here. Because teams either have a 0 or a -1, meaning that you have 12 games played, all 12 are quality games, or you have 12 games played and 11 are quality games. So there's 1 game difference of over a 3-week period. Don't worry about it. Not important. Boston and Brooklyn have interesting schedules. They play 11 games in this playoff period, but only 1 back-to-back. Compare and contrast with Phoenix and the Clippers, who play 12 games, but 4 back-to-backs. Again, you have Kawhi, got 12 games, but 4 back-to-backs. Does he play 8 games? Versus a Nets player who, maybe it's even Cam Thomas, who might sit a back-to-back, or Michael Porter. But you still get 10 games out of him. Most likely. But also, you got the problem that both these teams could be absolutely dreadful, and other stuff is afoot during that time. So that's going to be, I guess, some of the risk associated with that. I want to come back and talk about Yahoo default playoffs. I want to do it, so I will do it. And of course, that is the week 22 to week 24 playoff schedule. Now, what is that? When we're talking dates, we're talking starting on the 9th of March and going through, is it the 9th of March? Sorry. Going through to the, as I just get my dates right. My bad. Starting on the 16th of March, going through to the 5th of April. So that's week 22 to 24. Remembering, Yahoo likely does 2-week combinations, which in your schedule might look like 20 to 22. But again, if you're using calendar weeks, is the only way to actually, if you have that in your head, it's the only way to make sure you're not getting it wrong. We've got 4 teams playing 12 games. Houston, Memphis, Orlando, and the Wizards. We've got most teams playing 11. Atlanta, Brooklyn, Boston, Charlotte, Chicago, Detroit, Golden State, the Clippers, Lakers, Pelicans, Suns, Spurs, Raptors, Jazz. We've got a smaller amount playing 10. That's Cleveland, Dallas, Indiana, Miami, Milwaukee, Minnesota, Oklahoma City, Philadelphia, Portland, Sacramento. And there are only 2 teams that play 9 games. That is Denver and the Knicks that have 9 games during that time frame. Denver has a 3-4-2. The Knicks have a 4-3-2. So you'll notice 2-game weeks. In terms of the 12-game team, so Houston, we're going 4-4-4. Memphis is a 4-4-4. Orlando is a 4-4-4, while the Wizards are a 5-3-4. So just slightly different there. Let's have a look at some more of the info here on the Yahoo default and how that stuff sort of breaks down. We'll take a look at that as I just try to bring it up. The key takeaways here. Again, we've got the teams with Phoenix and Washington with 5 games, but that is in week 1. So if you've got the bye, that doesn't matter. And then you have got 5 teams during Yahoo default playoffs that have 2-game weeks. Minnesota, Phoenix, Denver, the Knicks, and the Blazers. Denver, the Knicks, and the Blazers have 2-game weeks in finals week. Minnesota and Phoenix have, Minnesota's got it in week 2, and Phoenix has it in week 2. So Phoenix goes from a 5 into a 2. A 5-2-4 playoff schedule. Now, if you are making decisions about, see, this is where it gets different. If you're using my playoff schedule, Phoenix has got it good. And it is offset slightly by having a 5-game week here. But if you get a bye in week 1 where Phoenix is a 5-game week, then you go straight into a 2-gamer, well, Devin Booker needs to be dropped down. Anthony Edwards with a 2-game week needs to be dropped down in week 2. You can't avoid week 2. You can't get a bye for week 2. You've got to drop Anthony Edwards down. Randall and Gobert and those sort of guys, you don't worry that much about it. The Knicks, Portland, Brunson, Towns, Deni Avdija, Jokic with 2 games. Jokic has 2 games in the finals. Is that enough? Now, last season, Luka had 2 games in the finals, so I did not want to take him at 2 or 3. I would take him at 4 or 5. I dropped him down. And this is a question where I'm not sure on the answer yet. I'm not sure on my answer yet. But is the fact that in your Yahoo default playoffs, now for my playoffs, it doesn't matter. So this is not a factor for me if I'm using my dates. But if you're using Yahoo default, the presumed number 1 pick has 2 games in the finals. So do you move Shea ahead? You could. The Thunder go 3-4-3. Do you move Victor Wembanyama up to number 1? They go 4-3-4. Do you move the Lakers and Luka Doncic 4-3-4 ahead of Jokic because he's got a 2-game week where he goes 3-4-2? 9 games only. We haven't had to make this decision with Jokic before. He has been unbelievably good. I do worry that he might play 3 to 4 fewer minutes this season and won't average 1.8 steals, a triple-double, or shoot 42% from 3, which brings him back to the pack slightly. And then does the 2-game week take him away from number 1? I would think that it's a totally reasonable call to make that call. If you think that that's cool, man, I think that there will be some regression. I think that's reasonable to project. And I want to avoid a 2-game week. Take him at 2. Now, I don't think it's enough to move Shea or Luka ahead of him, necessarily, but I think Wemby could. You could argue, though, that Shea can go ahead. You could argue that Luka can go ahead. You could argue, given Yahoo defaults, that you might put Jokic at 4. I wouldn't. But if you argued okay, I get that. If my opponent has 4 games of Wemby, and no guarantee that's the case, but if my opponent has 4 games of Wemby and I've got 2 games of Jokic, I'm in real trouble. Like that's impossible to deal with. And that I don't care about 4s or 3s as much. It's about 2s. And that's where we get a real problem. So you got to watch with Edwards, Booker, Jokic, Towns. They're the big ones. Like, I'm not that worried about Deni, not that worried about Brunson. They're guys, but they're 3rd, 4th round guys. They're not as important in this scenario. Washington has the most back-to-backs in Yahoo default. That's 4. So you got to watch what they're doing. They're going to be bad. We're not in a situation where there's big quality game gaps. Teams are either a -1 in quality games, meaning they play 12 games with 11 qualities, or they're a -2, 12 games with 10 qualities. But only 1 difference still. Right? Not that big a deal. And then you've got Brooklyn, Boston, and the Clippers. In this 3-week period, they only have 1 back-to-back. So while I talked about the Clippers having the most back-to-backs in my default playoffs, in Yahoo default, they've got the fewest back-to-backs of 11 games, 1 back-to-back. That's huge when you're considering Harden, but more importantly, Kawhi. If you're taking that flyer on Kawhi, that is a monumental decision or monumental impact that could be had there. Let's now talk about ESPN default before we get into talking about All-Star break and NBA Cup at the end. This should be the final 4 weeks of the season, an ESPN default scenario. So that means we've got 4 weeks of playoffs. There are 4 teams that play 16 games. Houston, Memphis, Orlando, and Washington. Most teams play either 14 or 15. So the 15-game teams, Atlanta, Brooklyn, Boston, Chicago, Detroit, the Warriors, Clippers, Lakers, Suns, Spurs, Raptors. 14 games. Charlotte, Cleveland, Dallas, Indiana, Miami, Milwaukee, Minnesota, Pelicans, Thunder, Sixers, Blazers, Jazz. And then the 3 bad teams, Jokic with 13, Knicks, Towns, Sacramento, and Sabonis, 13. Now, 3 games difference over 4 weeks is actually inconsequential. It doesn't matter. And given that ESPN runs 2-week defaults, I don't think that the 2-game week that those teams that we talked about before, Denver, Portland, and the Knicks that have 2 games in that first week of finals matters that much. Because, for example, the Knicks go 2 and then 4, so they play 6 games. All right. Now, the majority of teams play 8 games, 7 games, but some play 6. All right. And they're one of them. The Blazers go 2-4. So they've got 6, and the Nuggets go 2-4. So they're not in a disaster zone where they go 2-3. So it's not as big of a deal in the ESPN default as I believe it was in the Yahoo default situation. So let's go into a few key takeaways again out of the ESPN default schedule and have a look at how it goes. So we're talking weeks 22, 23, 24, 25 on the calendar. Again, Phoenix and Washington, the same as Yahoo default, have 5 games in round 1 of the playoffs. Minnesota, Phoenix, Denver, the Knicks, and Portland have 2-game weeks. Minnesota and Phoenix have it in the first round of the playoffs. Denver, New York, and Portland have it in the second round of the playoffs. But like I just said, it's not as big of a deal because they play 6 games over 2 weeks, which is lower than the main amount, which is 8 games over 2 weeks. But a 2-game difference over 2 weeks is very different to 2 games over 1 week, which is when you're comparing a 4-game player team or a 4-game player to a 2-game player. 4 of Wemby versus 2 of Jokic, big deal, huge deal. 8 of Wemby versus 6 of Jokic, big deal, less of a big deal, but still, it's still a big deal. But 8 versus 6 is different than 4 versus 2, so it's not as big of a concern to me. The other things to look at here, Washington over that 4-week period has the most back-to-back. So Washington's back half schedule is littered with back-to-backs. They are back-to-back heavy. At the end of the season, they got 5. And once again, we do not have any big separation in quality games. Teams are either -3 or -4. So there's a lot more heavy schedule days at the end of the season. But teams are either -3, so they play 16 games with 13 qualities, or 16 games with 12 qualities. Only one difference. The only exception is the New York Knicks only have 13 games, but 11 of those 13 are quality games. So while the Knicks have a 2-game week put in there, they're in a situation where they avoid a lot of the high volume days. So these other teams might have -4 in terms of they play 4 high volume games. The Knicks only play 2 over that 4-game period. Again, not really that much, but it is still something. The last thing I want to talk about are the combined weeks. Now, I don't know what Yahoo is going to do. By the time you are watching this, they may have actually released their product and you can see. But last week, they had good intentions, but didn't have any idea what they were doing in terms of executing it. They combined a few weeks in the NBA Cup. Now, again, we still don't know this exactly. But I believe the way you should be combining, and if you've got the ability to do this, which you can do on Fantrax, you combine week 8 and 9 into 1 week, which you can now call Game Week 8. All right? Because that's the week where the NBA Cup sits on Tuesday, December the 15th. And I think that Monday, December the 14th, will be an empty scheduled day. But it might not be. Sorry, Tuesday, December the 16th, and then Monday as open. Right? What happens, though, during that week 8 combined with week 9, we are getting teams that are playing either 4 games or 5 games. And pretty much perfect for a fantasy matchup, even though it stretches over 14 days. 4 games or 5 games. Now, what you are going to have during that time frame, you are going to have 3 days where there are 2 games on. You are going to have at least 1 day where there are 0 games on, maybe 2 days where there are 0 games on out of the 14 days. So you're probably going to have those 3 2-game days and maybe 2 0 games. So 5 out of the 14 will be useless sort of get days. But still, we're getting 4 or 5 games over a 14-day period, which is perfect to smoosh those weeks together. There might be extra back-to-backs chucked in there, but we don't know that. And I am expecting that Monday, December the 15th is a 0-game day, and Tuesday, December the 16th is definitely a 0-game day. All-Star Week is calendar week 17 and calendar week 18, which, if it's combined on Yahoo, will become week 16. And in that 2-week period, 14 days, there's usually 8 days worth of games, and teams either play 3 games, they play 4 games, or they play 5 games. Boston and Toronto only have 3 games over that 14-day period, whereas over half the league, or almost exactly half the league actually, has 5 games. So Boston and Portland are going to be in a bad situation there, but you're not making any drafting decisions based on that. But I just want to, again, inform you. I think you should be combining the dates February the 9th through to February the 22nd into one game week. I think you should also be combining, if you've got the ability to do this, with how your system sets up, combining the 8th of December through to the 21st of December, because that is when the NBA Cup knockout rounds take place. And I think that gives you the best result. And that's it. That's the schedule. So, we move into a situation here where I think your big concern is going to be, if I'm playing Yahoo default, which you shouldn't, but if you are, Jokic has 2 games in the finals. Can I move Wemby, Shea, or Luka ahead of him? If you're playing my default, Shea has 9 games in playoffs versus 12 for the max teams. Is that enough to push him to 4 behind Luka, Wemby, Jokic? Do you make decisions on the 2-game teams? Which I think you should. Cleveland. Big call there on guys like Mobley and Mitchell. It's an important call to be able to make those decisions. You've got Atlanta, Trae Young and Jalen Johnson. They've all got 2-game weeks. New Orleans in that period too. And then you go to the other ones, the Knicks, the Nuggets, and the Blazers with 2-game weeks. There are a lot of 2-game weeks littered through fantasy playoffs. Don't read generic advice. Don't listen to generic advice on podcasts or videos, which most people are pretty good at not doing that, without understanding what they're referencing. If someone just says week 20, understand what it means. Is it week 20 on Yahoo, which is actually week 22 on the calendar? Is it week 20 on the calendar? What are they actually talking about? If they say, oh, I've got to avoid him, he's got a 2-game playoff week, does it even matter to you? Because to me, if you're using my dates, Jokic's 2-game playoff week doesn't mean anything because I finished fantasy by then. I'm not avoiding Towns because of a 2-game week because it doesn't matter to me. But what does matter is Trae Young and Evan Mobley and Jalen Johnson having 2-game weeks. I'm not even saying that something's bad, or I am actually. The Yahoo and ESPN defaults are bad, but whatever. You just got to know, A, how it plays out, and if you're hearing advice that sounds generic, you have to understand what it relates to before you make a dumb decision. Go, I'm not going to draft Jokic, and then your league finishes on March 22nd, and he doesn't have a 2-game week. That's what you got to be aware of. You also got to be aware of that I want your thumb right up me. Hit it up there. Comment. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.